Coming up next.
My compass had been women. Like literally my compass from so much of my
Yes,
life
I
had
am
been.
so glad you said that because for the women in our audience, a lot of times their compass is men. If
Yeah,
I can please the man, if I can follow the man, if I can submit to, in a Christian understanding, if I can submit to the man, it will all be okay.
yeah.
And what was your experience with that compass?
It's somehow it never worked out.
It
So
was
weird.
broken.
Yeah. It
Welcome to Faith Over Addiction podcast, where the chains of fixing and striving are broken and joy is rediscovered in Christ. You're here because you know there's more for you, a life beyond addiction's chaos, rooted in God's peace and promises. This is the place where Christian women like you learn to release the weight of fixing and striving and instead lean into God's strength to create a home filled with love, grace, and hope. She is clothed with strength and dignity. Proverbs 31:25. That's you. You may not feel like it yet, but you are stronger than you know. And God has so much more for you than carrying someone else's addiction. Here, we'll uncover how to set healthy boundaries with love and a little humor. Find resilience and grace in the messy moments of life. Celebrate small victories and embrace joy like never before. Lean into God's promises for restoration and strength because He's not done with your story or your loved ones. This is your invitation to rise up, embrace your worth in God's kingdom, and take back what's been stolen by addiction, your peace, your joy, your future. Your faith is the foundation, and your boundaries are the bridge, and God's truth is your guide. I'm Tanya Gioia, your host and fellow traveler on this journey through the chaos of addiction. I'm here to cheer you on, equip you with tools that work, and share the truth that's changed my life. The joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Together, we'll uncover how to create safe, loving space for healing, starting with your own heart and home. By setting boundaries, trusting God's plan, and embracing His truth, you can reclaim your joy, your peace, and your family's future. Then you will be able to stand firm for your family and legacy as a kingdom daughter, a woman who can laugh at the days to come, knowing her identity is secure in Christ. So grab a cup of coffee or tea and get comfortable. Let's walk this journey together. We're about to take back what's been stolen, create a safe, healing space for you and your family, and rediscover the joy God has waiting for you.
This isn't
So
like
you're struggling with your living arrangement, with drugs, with the existential crisis, with what exactly, with your belief in Christ, what
it was the
exactly is Cisco seeing?
it was they were I couldn't function. Like after writing the first draft, I couldn't function because it ties into you realize Jesus says, I am the light of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I could not, for the longest time, I could not conceive of that light in my life. I couldn't see that light in everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I judged people, how they looked, what they believed, how they talked, how they dressed, whatever. I judged. And then I saw this picture, and this picture of this woman contained, for me, the light of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, and I started working with one of Tony's coaches in September of 2021. And she, at some point in 2022, said, well, you saw your reflection in this picture. And I was like, yeah, that's like super
It
intense.
wasn't about the woman at all. It was about
No,
Christ and the reflection.
no. So I go to so we were traveling now. People were traveling, I think towards the summer of 2021, people could travel again. And I went to Israel because I'd never been to Israel as a student of history. And obviously with what I was doing, I kind of wanted to go there and get my own peace of mind. And so I went, the week I went, it was Passover, Orthodox Easter, and Ramadan all together.
Woohoo! You lined it up, didn't you?
Oh, I didn't plan on it, but it just worked out that way. I had a Muslim tour guide. It was just he and I. He was brilliant. We toured the country, and it was breathtaking because to walk those places, even to go, we're driving up towards the Sea of Galilee. And as soon as we come up on the Galilee, I'm driving and he looks over and he says, and that's where Jesus walked on water. And then he looked at me and he says, I get chills every time I say that. I just got chills too.
Yeah.
Um, so, and part of what my struggle is I want, like, I had this idea that I was going to leave Cisco on my terms.
Mm,
And by the summer, the first draft was really dark because if you understand the power of I am, Yahweh tells Moses, tell them I am has sent me to you. Jesus says, before Abraham was, I am is the foundation of our identity for all of us.
hmm.
And I was processing that and I realized my desire to control my outcome was not going to necessarily agree with what Christ was guiding me towards.
That's
So
a hard lesson, isn't it?
it
That's a
really
really
is.
hard lesson.
It really is. I got to August of 2022 and I finally showed the cover of Love Letters to the Virgin Mary to my boss because it got so the King David connection goes much deeper. Like I looked at the Holocaust and said, well, the Holocaust, Hitler was the Antichrist. There's a good book called The Spear of Destiny that calls out Hitler as the Antichrist because he was obsessed, well, not just because of that, but he was obsessed with the spear of Longinus, which is the spear believed to have pierced Christ's side at the time to make sure he was dead. And and then obviously the Holocaust was mankind's symbolic effort to destroy the source of its creation because
Mm.
Judaism gave birth to Christianity and gave birth to Islam and everything else. And so I got really deep in that piece and I said, well, I'm still the person who's coming up with these ideas too. So I told my boss, I showed him the cover, and he's like, wow, this is like awesome. And I said, I can give you another year and then I got to leave. I'm leaving Cisco. And it turns out that year was only 6 months because, or 4 months or 5 months, because then December, Cisco said, we're doing a layoff and you're invited to participate. I'm like, oh, okay.
You're like,
Um,
oh, okay.
and what was cool about it in a sort of whimsical way was so this woman from France, her birthday is December 8th, and that is the day that Catholics celebrate the feast of the Immaculate Conception when Mary was conceived, which is a pretty interesting coincidence. So I wanted to send her a copy of the book in time for her birthday, and I did. I had an address for her, and I sent her, and I didn't hear back from her. And that was like, I think our birthday that year was on a Thursday or Friday. And the next Monday, I found out I'm being let go. My last day with Cisco is going to be February. So I'm like, oh, great. Fast forward to Christmas that year, and it's December 23rd, which was also a Friday. Or no, I'm sorry. I might have been a Friday, I can't remember. But and this woman from France responds. She's gotten the package, and FedEx has notified her that package needs to be picked up. And she's like, "Who are you? And what is this package?" And I said, "No, the package is real. This." She's like, "Well, I don't want it. Tell FedEx to take it back." I'm like, right before Christmas. This is awesome. Like this, I wanted to like do this beautiful thing, and okay. So Christmas comes and goes. I call FedEx, or I go to my local FedEx in January, and they're like, "We can't do anything because it's already got to its final destination." It wasn't her home address, but I had an address, and I'm like, "Okay, well then it's done. She can forget about it. I'm going to forget about it."
Yeah.
So February 2023 rolls around, the end of February, and she reaches back out to me, and she's like, "I told you to call FedEx. They're asking me to pay to pick up this package now." I'm like, I paid $80 to send that to you. Like, what are you talking about? And she's like, I didn't ask for this. I don't know who you are. I said, remember in 2021, in January 2021, I reached out to you and said that you had inspired my belief in heaven. And I was writing a story about that. That's all this is. I just sent you a copy of the book. And this is all just through chat, but her tone changes instantly. And she said, well, this is really unusual, but thank you for the book. And I didn't hear from her again. And then the next day I was doing laundry. It was a Saturday. This was a Saturday now. And this voice just came to me. She got the book. It's like, oh, interesting. I want to go back to something you said earlier. It took me until 2022 the summer of 2022, after I'd finished the final manuscript, to realize just what you said. It wasn't about the woman, it was about me. Because
Mm-hmm.
I was the one who saw all this beauty in her. I
Mm-hmm.
was the one who had the conception of this story in me. And I
Mm-hmm.
needed to start saying, what did this say about me? And what
Not
did
what does
this
it say about her? Yeah.
and what did this say about my relationship with Jesus?
Yes.
And that was so I took that psychology with me as I left Cisco in 2023, February 2023. I had this sort of last hurrah with saying something to her, and I stopped following her on Instagram because I'm like, this is pointless. It's not helping me any to see, like, I still see this beauty in her, but it's about you and Jesus, dude. Like, figure that out. Like, this is
Yes.
your
Yes.
relationship with Jesus. And so I wrote a sequel called Love Letters to Jesus, The Heart of Ragnarok. And it's partly because if you watch Marvel movies,
Yes, absolutely. I know what Ragnarok is.
yeah, so the first Thor movie, there in
Yes.
about I think it's the 52 or 53-minute mark, there is a reference to King David. There's a book on a bookshelf and it says David the King. And
Yes.
I pulled from that because I had this Ragnarok moment during um in May of I was watching Ragnarok with my friends that I was living with, or I was going to go live with. We weren't living together at the time, but I'd spend the weekends with them. And I had this wild Ragnarok thing while we were watching Thor Ragnarok. And that led me to say, okay, go, let me look at the first movie. I saw this encounter. And then in Thor Ragnarok, there's a moment where if you freeze frame it, you can see they offer Thor there's a mural. So Hela, the goddess of death, comes in and she wants to redo it. And she looks up and there's a mural on the ceiling of ask what Asgard represents. And there's three different paintings that highlight. And the first painting is Thor taking the sacrament. Like someone is offering Thor the chalice that has the blood of Christ in it. And he's got this halo. And I think Balder's behind him. Balder's got a halo. And then the next image is Odin, Freya, Loki, and Thor. And they all have the halos. And then the last image is Odin and Thor separated by like four women, and the halos are gone. I was like, oh, that's pretty wild. That's pretty wild. Okay. But then you look at Thor was the Nazi swastika is a symbol for Mjolnir. And if you
Mm.
understand that the Germans fought blitzkrieg or lightning warfare was their style of warfare. So like there's a really wild part because then you start to get into like multiple universes and things like that. I won't go too far down that path. So I wrote this love letters to Jesus and I finished it in the summertime and I realized this was more for me to look at my psychology because if you understand Carl Jung, there's the self, there's the anima, which we talked about. In women, it's called the animus. There's the shadow, the darker parts of yourself that
Mm-hmm.
you project onto other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I was processing my shadow. Like you have to integrate your shadow. You don't kill it. You
Yes.
integrate that shadow to make it a part of you. And it's through that reconciliation that the Holy Spirit within you kind of burns away the parts of you that aren't with Christ. And
Yeah.
that's kind of the transformational process. And I didn't realize that until I wrote that book. And that was the bulk of 2023. I got into coaching. And then I kind of just started to realize like this is I could start to see where I could see the light of Christ in people. And I'll tell you what I started doing because I think this might be useful too. I started doing incantations. Incantations, Tony Robbins talks a lot about incantations. And incantation is just it's an affirmation. So I could say something like, I am a genius. We talked about the power of I am. I am a genius. I say that 1,000 times. It's great. If I say it with emotion, I am a genius.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm getting more of my nervous system involved. And the more I get my nervous system involved, the more it starts to change my physiology. So it becomes part of my DNA. And I started doing incantations in September of 2023. I've been doing them for a while, but the ones I did in 2023 was I see the light of Christ in everything and everyone. I see the light
Yes.
of Christ in everything and everyone. And it was amazing because this picture, I had this picture, like I printed out because I realized I don't care what anyone else believes. This picture contained for me the first light of Christ. Like my journey to Christ originated, like the distinct, the exactness of believing without hesitation the existence of Christ, the perpetual and eternal existence of Christ was born from what I the meaning I took from this picture. And so I printed the picture out and I had it in my bedroom. And it was, I remember the wheat in the picture. When I first saw it, it was like a faded blue. Like if you remember
Mm.
back when Maximus dies and he goes into the afterlife, the wheat's blue. It's not like how it is in the beginning. It was kind of like that. And by September of 2023, it was like golden. It was like
Mm.
shimmering gold. And I have a little rebounder, like a little trampoline, because if you, one, it's good for your lymphatic system, but two, the more you engage your body while you're doing incantations, the more you get your nervous system involved. And so I would jump up and down for 10 minutes in the morning on my rebounder, and I would do different incantations. I would do "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," which is
Yeah,
the idea that everything I need is already inside me. I don't need to depend on someone else for my sense of wholeness, because if I do, I'm creating a codependency. And it's not that I don't have healthy relationships, I don't want those. I don't want to depend on someone for something in that sense because
sure.
it creates that
It's the
unhealthy.
interdependence instead of the dependence. So you're
Exactly.
interdepending on each other.
Exactly. So the other one was I see the love and light of Christ in everything and everyone. And I remember I was jumping up and down, and uh it was like a light bulb like changed. It was like my life got an upgrade. The light in my place just changed. And I saw that the light that had been just in that picture now was everywhere. And it was like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so wild. Like, and it really, it helped me really, that moment helped me crystallize the internalization of faith. Like it's not a passive activity. Faith is an active sport. So the other thing I did, and again, so now I've been working with this Tony Robbins coach for 2 years, and she's seen me go through highs and lows, euphoria, despair, and has been just stalwart. She's been amazing. And I had finished a program to go along with, I'd written a book, I was writing a book called Bringing God to Life.
Mm,
And it was the idea of how heaven on earth actually would happen in the 21st
right.
century. And to go with that, I was putting together a program where you're the hero of your own journey, because we're all on a hero's journey. Like that is, you call
Yes.
it Jacob's ladder, but we're all, there's a reason why Hollywood has a format for their movies, and because it works, but it also in some ways honors Christ, because every one of those stories has a resurrection element to it. Whether it's
Yeah.
Neo discovering in the Matrix that it's all information, or it's Luke at the end of Return of the Jedi deciding not to kill his father and join the Emperor and instead save his father. There are elements, there's a resurrection element to every great hero's journey story. And I was going to call it performance of a lifetime. And my coach said, yeah, but it's still just a performance. And I just told her this about 2 weeks ago. I said, like, that really made me see, like, you really want me to dig into this King David thing. Like, you really want me to dig into this further. And I didn't say that at the time, but it's certainly how I felt. And so in September, I said, well, let me do something that I've never thought about doing before. Because oftentimes it's the last thing we want to do that
It's
gives
the
us,
resistance, right?
yeah,
The resistance is where we need to go.
yeah. So I said, let me put myself in King David's shoes. Let me go in
Sandals.
sandals. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let me put myself into his story so that I can understand from his perspective his relationship with Jesus Christ. Because there are 18 references in the New Testament to Jesus being called the Son of David. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
well, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
So initially I did it. It was exhausting. Like it was psychologically exhausting because I followed a Harvard course on King David, and then I was reading about the Davidic covenant. And the essence of the Davidic covenant is David is promised. He wants to make a house for God because the Ark of the Covenant is in a tent. And the prophet Nathan tells him, no, God says he's going to make a house for you, a
Mm-hmm.
dynasty of kings. And then after you're dead and sleeping with your ancestors, your offspring is going to establish the everlasting kingdom and your eternal throne. And
His
David's,
offspring that was built out of an unwed, murderous covenant.
yes,
Isn't that interesting how God
yes.
takes
Isn't
people?
that interesting? And uh, and so David is overjoyed because he knows this promise is being made to a human. And oh my gosh, so great. So David then sleeps with Bathsheba, has her husband killed, curses himself when Nathan brings this to his attention before he knows
Mhm.
that Nathan is talking about him. And then we have the house divided. Well, what does it say in the New Testament? A house divided cannot stand.
Yes.
So, how can the house David has built stand with what he's done? That's why he writes about being in the pit. But he also writes about Jesus' death by crucifixion.
Mm.
They pierced my hands and my feet. Someone who broke bread with me will betray me. And
Mhm.
the difference between what David's writing about and say what Isaiah writes about when he prophesies about the Messiah is David's writing in the first person. They pierced my hands and my feet. Someone I broke bread with betrayed me, will betray me. So then you have this new context. Well, now what does that say about David? Because David also says everyone is a liar. So what you see in the Davidic covenant, then David is, and there's a great thing. We don't have to get too into it because it's more about my latest book. But the idea of federal headship or corporate representation was very big in ancient Hebrew and is a part of, I think, deeper Christian theology. And it's the idea one person stands in for everyone.
Which is what the Christ did for us.
Yeah, so Christ is as the Messiah stands in
Adam
for
stood
everyone.
in, and then the new Adam
Yes.
stands in.
And so then I said, well, then how does David fit into that? Because the promise is made to David, but we don't hear about Adam being in the pit. We hear about David being in the pit. And I said, then there must be an idea for redemption. If Christ is the universal redeemer, there must be an example of universal redemption. And wouldn't that be King David? Because there are also multiple references to David being raised up, Jeremiah 39, Ezekiel 34, Ezekiel 37. And so I start to, well, is that the path that it takes? When you pick up your cross to believe in Christ, is that the kind of the path you get to take?
Well, and he's redeemed in his humanness too. I mean, after he does the trying to move the Ark of the Covenant, he goes in and he sits before God and says, "I'm so sorry."
Oh yeah.
And
He
then after Nathan comes to him, he says, "Oh my goodness, it is me." So he repents regularly. After the baby dies, he gets up, he washes, he says, until the baby died, I thought there was still hope, but now
yeah.
God has spoken, and I will get up and I'll repent and I'll do what I need to do.
Yeah, and it's not that he doesn't die scorning God or unrepentant. What's fascinating is that, and this speaks to a larger theological context, right? There is we have grown up, and I'm saying in North America, for the past 200 years with the idea that we die and then go to heaven.
Mm,
And yet, Paul in his writings says, no, we have the resurrection power that Christ had in us. The spirit of truth lives within us too. And I've read a few books of N.T. Wright, who's an English bishop,
yes.
who's written, yeah. And he talks about like the West has kind of got that wrong. Like you're not escaping to go to heaven. God's plan is to come here to live on earth with his
To
people.
be connected, because he kept putting his temple in the middle of the people. When it was a tent, when it was a temple, he kept saying, "I want to be with you, to be present with you today." I completely agree that we've been sold this heretical kind of insurance package that all I need to do is believe and then
Yeah.
I'll be in heaven. Well, you're missing, I mean, okay, yes, but you're missing the great opportunity to exist with Christ now, to
Yeah.
be in that relationship now, which I don't really know what heaven's going to be like, but the preciousness of being now, we're giving up the best part of it while we exist on his planet.
Well, and that's what, and this was a long time from in coming from me, but that's kind of the what I was developing on because also in Luke, or excuse me, in Acts 2:34, Luke says David doesn't ascend to heaven. Like Luke says, for David did not ascend to heaven, and yet he said to the Messiah, sit at my right hand while I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. So then you look at, well, if David doesn't ascend to heaven and he's talked about being in the pit, then is he the first act of redemption? Like, does David have to? Because obviously, I remember someone actually reached out 2 months ago. We're going to do a podcast, And then I said something about, well, I'm talking about one of my books is The Resurrection of King David, because I think that's the path is if we have resurrection power, then that is a conscious ascent to realizing everlasting life. It's not like we die and suddenly wake up, or we die and we stand in front of a throne, finding out if we get in or get out. I think Christ has probably got it a little more locked down than that. Um, and she
There's
said,
more that
well,
we don't know. Like you
yeah,
said, you've had a judgment day. You've had
yeah.
a come what we call it in the South, a come to Jesus meeting, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And she said, well, surely David goes to heaven. He's a man after God's own heart. I'm like, you're missing the point. It's not about going to heaven. It's about heaven coming to you. It's about waking up to that reality now. And yeah, you can look at the news or the media and see, oh my gosh, the world is this, or Ukraine and Israel. Oh my gosh, Trump is this or that. You have to bring it inside you, but like Christ has got it. This is his kingdom. Like that's
Now,
the whole point
as
of
it
his,
is in heaven. So
yeah,
the Lord's Prayer even talks about it, that there is that we don't have
coming
to
to
wait.
earth.
There is
Yes.
that closure already
Yes.
here. And,
Yes.
and and even when you talk about when things happen, it is not a war in this sphere. It is a war between princes and principalities outside of our understanding. So those things are going on simultaneously to what we're doing. And then we can bring the light in. I really like how you're bringing all this together because we can bring the light in now. We don't have to wait.
Yeah. And so I got to November of 2023, and I was going to another Tony Robbins event, this time in Dallas. And I was still 2023 was hard for me because it was am I going to go all in on the King David storyline that I've created with my one book, the uncanny coincidences with other, with this other woman or with the woman, the extraordinary coincidences, just happen to see a Thor or a King David reference in the first Thor movie. Am I going to do all this? Or am I just going to try to say, okay, this is all conjecture that I made up through my own a very serious midlife crisis that just happened to coincide with the pandemic? and and I can't break my addiction to like I can't break marijuana. Like I this has become something. Initially, it was a creative outlet because it was it's loosened me up a little bit, and now it's become this albatross around my neck that I cannot get rid of. So finally, before going to Dallas to see Tony Robbins, I said, okay, that's it. Like whatever. And part of it was I was afraid because I'm like, is this all going to just if I just all imagine this because of the effect of marijuana on me, and I have to find out. I have to find out. So I go to the event. There's 15,000 people at the event. There's 2,000 or 3,000 people online on Zoom. And the first day, and I've been telling my coach. I mean, my coach is well aware that I've written this book about the resurrection. I've sent her a copy of the book. Uh, I'm assuming that Tony's like in contact with her to some degree because I've had interactions with him, but he hasn't spoken. We haven't spoken directly except for about 5 seconds. Um, so the first day of the event, he stands in front of me, but he's like facing me, like it's an adversarial thing, kind of almost. And he's about 15 feet in front of me. And I kind of got it because I was still like, now I think 4 days without marijuana. And so I'm like coming down. The next day, he doesn't do all 4 days because he's been doing this for almost 50 years and he's worn out his vocal cords and he's created a false voice box in his chest, actually. So he'll do videos from previous events and he teaches the same thing. And such a good storyteller that it doesn't matter that he's doing a video. On the one video, he's much younger in his career and he's talking about how he used to help people stop smoking.
Mm.
And he would take them into a hotel room and like force them to smoke until they committed, like, you can't make me smoke. Like he just kind of conditioned them so that they didn't want to smoke anymore because they found it so repulsive. At the end of the video, he says, sometimes you go to a tool and it doesn't work often. He's like, one time, this guy wanted me to help him stop smoking marijuana. And the crowd starts to laugh. And that second on the video, they cut to me in the audience of 15,000 people.
Wow.
And and then they go back to the video. I'm like, okay. And my friends are like, oh my gosh, you're on the article. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. And so I'm like, all right, message, got it. So the next Friday, so the event goes Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, fly home from Dallas Monday, meet with my coach on Fridays. And I said, you'll never guess what happened on at this event with Tony. And she said, oh, tell me. I said, oh, well, during this, he stood in front of me and then this video thing. And she said, yeah, Tony read your book and he knows you've been struggling with marijuana. And I was like, oh, this is real. Like, this is real. Like,
Yeah.
this is all real. So I move into 2024 and I hadn't looked at the woman on, I hadn't looked at this French woman. I would say her name, but out of respect, I'm not going to say anything. But I hadn't looked her up online for a year, and I said, well, let me just see how she's doing. And I'd worked at an event, I'd worked one of Tony's events as crew in December of that year, so I'd made some friends, and we said, let's support each other as we move through the year. So in February, I looked her up online. I still saw all the beauty, but I appreciated it was beauty that I saw. Like I was just like, this is there was no longing. There was no like there was just
Mm-hmm.
appreciation. This is beautiful. What was funny was one of the friends I made at this December event also followed her. And my friend was from Canada and the woman's in France. She's got like 230,000 followers. I think that's interesting. That's a neat coincidence. And then I got to Easter of last year, Easter week. And part of my morning routine was I used to go to my news feed every day. I'd go to the same news feed every day and just to look what's going on in the world, what's going on with the, election, presidential, wind up to the election last year. Um, the Wednesday of Easter, I scroll in my news feed and there's a health and fitness ad with this woman from France on it.
Mm.
First time ever. Never seen her before in my news feed. I hadn't been search. I think I looked her twice in February, and now this is the end of March because that's when Easter was last year. And so I got to last June last year, and I just wrote her a note. I said I stopped following you because I need to focus on my faith. Um, here's oh by the way, here's what's happened. When I did follow it, when I looked you up, this other woman from Canada follows you, which is pretty interesting. And then this happened, and here's the picture that I saw on Easter. And I said, you know what? Regardless of what you think of me, Jesus is obviously so much more than just the child of two people, and yet his story depends on two people. And so, whatever you think of me, I just want you to know that I'm going to honor the light I see in your eyes for the rest of eternity. And after that, I think the next day I saw that she'd read it. So I got the read receipts. Didn't expect anything because I'm just like, this is still about Jesus. Like, how do I share this path? And at the same time, I've been working with my coach and we kind of said, well, what is the greatest test of faith? The
Wow.
great, yeah, because it was like she's like bringing God to life is a good idea, but the book itself, I knew the book wasn't like it wasn't optimally written. Like I'd written that for myself, much I had kind of wrote love letters to Jesus for myself too. And so I said, well, what is the greatest test of faith? And I said, the greatest test of faith is, has Jesus conquered death or not? That is the resurrection. Like it's one thing I think people fixate on, well, he died for our sins. That's
Mm.
true. And without the resurrection, he's just a martyr. So the fact
Mm.
that he's raised from the dead, that's the big point, because then you start to say, well, if Paul says we have the resurrection power, and Jesus says that we should pick up our cross daily to follow him, then there really is a conscious hero's journey that you get to undertake. It's not that there is no, at least I don't believe, certainly not in my experience. I don't think there's a on-off switch where you die and then you suddenly wake up and you figure out eternity like that. I just
Mm-hmm.
and part of it is like in March of this past year, someone from Hollywood reached out and they said, "Hey, have you ever thought about turning The Lighthouse Keeper into a movie? Because I think you have something." I'm like, "Oh, that's really cool." And I brought that up to my coach, and we've talked a lot about Chat GPT and AI and multiple universes and all that stuff. And she said, "Well, why don't you have Chat GPT do the screenplay for you?" And I said, "Because I don't want
Oh,
to." Like, and it's not that she always. I think sometimes she asks the question so that I can come back with the right answer. But I was like,
right.
I don't want to. Like, I want to go through the process of what does it mean to be a screenwriter. just like I
Hmm.
wanted to go through the like as 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 challenging as it was to write love letters to the Virgin Mary, I did that. Like I did that. And like
Hmm.
I even came up I didn't come up with the subtitle until February of 2023 because I just like I don't know how the King David thing makes sense in that piece of it. And then I did some research online and there was a series the Left Behind series came out in the early 2000s.
Yes.
And the 12th book of that series, the final book, King David is resurrected. And I saw that online. I'm like, "Oh, resurrection." And what's cool about that is then you start to think the idea that you start to see how it's all connected. Like there's this
Hmm.
idea, there's a book called The Fourth Turning, written in 1997. And in it, the authors prophet had a premonition. They didn't prophesize because we don't use that anymore, but they had a premonition. They said a pandemic is going to happen in 2020.
Mm.
So you start to see, and once you start to see that it's all connected, then you realize Christ's existence is perpetual.
Yes.
It's up to us to communicate as frequently as possible until it's constant, until you don't. And even that's what I've been doing. Just my incantations this past week, I just started where I embody Christ's two commandments effortlessly, like love the Lord your God, love your neighbor as yourself. I embody those things because I want to make it into my DNA because I think one of the challenges, we haven't really talked about it, Tanya, one of the challenges, you mentioned it at the outset, is there are 45,000 denominations of Christianity on the planet today. They all have a different belief. They all have a different focus. And even biblically, if you think about, if you go and say, well, the Ten Commandments are what God gave us to learn how to live. No, God gave those to the Israelites because they did not have a nation. And that law was intentionally strict because only Christ could fulfill the law, because
Mm.
that's what Christ does. That's
Hmm.
why he says these two commandments fulfill the law in
They
essence.
encompass all 10. You
Bec-
cannot you cannot do the you cannot do the two that he requested and not fulfill the 10.
Exactly. And the first one, and that's the beauty. The first four Ten Commandments, or the first four of the commandments, are about our relationship with God. And the next six about relationship with other people.
Yeah.
Well, what's the first commandment? Relationship with God. What's the second commandment? Love other people. So you see, and the other piece that we don't talk about, just even from a psychological standpoint, is we don't do negation blindness well as human beings. And negation blindness is if I tell you, don't think of a pink elephant,
I immediately think of a pink elephant.
you have to in order not to do it. So if I tell you, thou shalt not do this, what are you going to think about to do? Well, thou shalt not covet my neighbor's wife. Well, how would I go about coveting my neighbor's wife? Oh, hey. I mean, it just so the fact that 80% of the Ten Commandments are written in negative, like it's right in one of his books makes this really beautiful point that the purpose of the Ten Commandments was to focalize sin on the Israeli people because then the Israelites fail, like they get exiled to Babylon. And so you see this pattern, and that's when you see, well, Christ isn't just the Messiah for Christians, Christ is the Messiah for humanity, because Christ is through the early Christians, Paul and the early writers didn't see him fulfilling or starting a new religion. They saw him fulfilling the prophecies of Israel's Messiah.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I think sometimes that gets lost on people because we have this sometimes there's a strange idea that God is an American idea. And there's an American idea of God. That's not necessarily the same thing. When you start to understand Jesus as the Alpha and Omega and to tie it back to King David, if David represents humanity's redemption, like the first or the second, since Christ is the firstborn of the dead, if David is the second born based on the fact that there are Bible verses that say that, and then you get to the end of the Bible where Christ in Revelation 22:16 says, I am the root and the offspring of David, meaning I am David's beginning and David's end. Well, then what does that say? If David's a human, you can say, well, what does that make David in heaven? But it also means if David's a human, then whatever is true for him must be true for all of us. It's not about the royal lineage. It's about is David's story the pathway towards redemption, towards resurrection as a conscious act to realize the grandeur of Christ's splendor and his eternal majesty.
Wow. I think that sums up the whole conversation. And I really like that because in times of trouble, we often turn to the Psalms. You know, we see David as very human in what
Yeah.
he's done. He's probably not a character you'd want to have over to dinner. He had some really shadow sides to him.
Yeah.
David, tell folks as we take this discussion to publish, tell them where they can find you, where they can find your other books. You're working on one right now, so give us a rundown, your website, all those other things.
Yeah. So davidrichardsauthor.com is my website. You can book me for speaking there. My books are available there. I'm updating the website here next week because I've finished 2 courses to go along with my latest book, Becoming One with Christ: The Lessons of King David. One of those courses is called Being One with Christ. So how you actually change your physiology and nervous system to embody his commandments permanently inside you. And the other one is the course on the Davidic covenant, because I think the covenant is overlooked for a lot of people. I'm also on socials on David Richards Author. All of my books are available on Amazon. So if you want to check them out, Whiskey and Yoga, The Lighthouse Keeper, Love Letters to the Virgin Mary, and Becoming One with Christ.
Fantastic. David, this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. I really appreciate it. And I will look forward to more conversations and more books. I'm sure you've got more.
I've got plans, definitely. Tanya, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you.
Thanks so much for tuning into the Faith Over Addiction podcast. Remember, nothing changes until something changes. Today is your day to step out in faith and make a difference. You are a daughter of the King, a woman who can spark incredible ripple effects of hope and healing, not just in your own life, but in your family, your community, and God's kingdom. If this episode encouraged you, bless someone else by sharing it. Send it to a friend who needs a little hope, or post it on Instagram and tag me. I'd love to hear what resonated most with you. And hey, if you're ready to reclaim your God-given identity and create a safe, loving space for yourself and those you care about, let's talk. Book a quick call with me today, and I'd love to hear your story and help you take the next step. Oh, and don't forget to head over to Apple Podcasts, search for Faith Over Addiction, and leave me a review. Your feedback not only makes my day, but helps other women find this podcast and step into freedom too. You are strong, you are loved, and the joy of the Lord is your strength. Nehemiah 8:10. Until next time, keep walking boldly into the life God has for you.